This is One on One. Welcome to One on One. I'm Steve Adubato. Everything you wanted and needed to know about business in this state and the nation, you're about to find out right now. Brad Fouss is in the house, Executive Vice President, Wholesale Banking, Sun National Bank, backed by popular demand. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you.
You told our producers 2014 would be a good year for business in New Jersey.
Yes.
Where'd you get that from?
If you look at what's happened in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of headwinds to businesses in New Jersey. You had a deep recession. Coming out of the recession, you had Obamacare, which a lot of companies are really struggling to understand how that worked, the impact. And then on top of that, you had the government shutdown, not understanding what was going on. This is the first year we've had since probably 2008 where you're going into the year without any of these headwinds. And I think there's a lot of businesses that have been holding back. You've got a very low interest rate environment still, and you've got banks willing to lend. So I think it's going to be a very good year for businesses to take advantage of the market.
Let me ask you something, Brad. The uncertainty. When there is a lot of uncertainty like that, does that cause business to, I know this is a hackneyed expression, hang out on the sidelines?
Yes, I think it does. You know, it's...
What I mean by that is not want to jump in, invest, spend their money, borrow, get involved, do it.
Yeah, business owners are going to do, no matter what those headwinds, what's happening in Washington, Obamacare, businesses are going to do what they need to do to run their business, but jump in and take the extra leap to buy a piece of equipment, do an expansion, hire new employees. If they've got those headwinds, they're going to probably hold back a little bit. And they've had these headwinds for the last couple of years.
What industries, as you see it, have more of a headwind, if you will, have more energy and are better primed right now, positioned to do well?
I think manufacturing here in New Jersey, even though you've lost a lot of manufacturing over the last couple of years. I mean, when I was a lender in the state of New Jersey back 20 years ago, you had a lot more manufacturing companies, small to mid-sized here in New Jersey than you do today. But you still have a lot of manufacturing, and you're hearing more and more about some manufacturing coming back to the United States. So I think they're very well poised. You know, part of it is some companies have found that the quality overseas as they move manufacturing there wasn't what they wanted, they moved it back. I think distribution, you know, you look at what New Jersey has, we're in a great location. You've got the port right here. You're right between New York, Philadelphia, you've got the New Jersey Turnpike. So we're really well poised for distribution companies.
Okay, but while New Jersey, we're actually talking to the head of Choose New Jersey, Tracy McDaniel, and their slogan has something to do with location, right? But there are other parts about New Jersey that, for some, might argue from a competitive point of view, ain't so great. So let's talk tax policy, regulation, et cetera, et cetera. How does New Jersey rate or rank from your perspective in terms of business attractiveness, beyond location being an advantage for us when it comes to the perception of many about our tax policies and our attitude toward business when it comes to the regulation by government of business?
New Jersey is not the most favorable state, no question about it.
What does that mean, favorable?
Favorable meaning, for what you said, tax policies. It's, you know, the taxes here are very high.
As opposed to a state like?
North Carolina. The advantages, though, that New Jersey has, so it is harder to get businesses to move into the state. They look at it and they say, look, some of the policies aren't as favorable to businesses, taxes are higher here, but businesses that are here, I've had companies over the years that have relocated down to, say, the Carolinas, for example.
Because they thought it was cheaper.
Well, when they ran the numbers, it was cheaper.
And what happens?
One of the big issues they have is employees. You don't have the talent pool that you have up here. One example, and this is going back, 6 or 7 years ago, I had a printing company. They opened up a second facility down in the Carolinas. They rolled out that the land is cheaper, buildings are cheaper, employees are cheaper. All that was absolutely true. Taxes are cheaper. But what they found was they don't have the quality of employees down there, and they ended up pulling a lot of the business back in here into New Jersey. Translation:
New Jersey has better people.
Absolutely.
Employees.
Absolutely.
Better educated, harder workers. What are we talking about here?
It's all. From an education standpoint, if you're any type of service company where you need higher educated people, you look at here, you look at all the colleges in the area.
New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey, you've got some pretty darn good higher education institutions.
Absolutely, and a lot of people grow up here and they stay in this area. You look at, I've even heard stories of companies down there, the work ethic here, New Jersey's worked very hard, and employees work very hard, from factory workers all the way up. And you don't get that in some other areas of the country.
Talk about the lending, the credit environment. What do you see 2014-15, and not that you can predict that far out? Do you have a sense, Brad, that loosening up more and more, hey, listen, we're ready. We're ready to unleash, if you will, those dollars because we're more confident from a banking perspective?
Absolutely, with one exception. I'll tell you what that exception is. You know, going into the recession, all banks pulled back. You know, we went in the recession. Right now, Sun National Bank and a lot of our competitors all have a lot of cash and really need to deploy that. So lending has gotten looser, and banks.
Hold on, sorry for interrupting. Go back. We need to deploy that. What does that mean?
If you look at banks' balance sheets, and I'm being very broad,
sure.
I'll use Sun National Bank as the example, we have a lot of cash on our balance sheet. How banks make money? We don't make money by sitting on cash on our balance sheet. We make it by putting into loans to businesses. So, and a lot of banks are in the same position. So banks want to go out and lend right now, and a lot of bankers, I think, feel similar to me, that the economy is going to start picking up. It's a good time to lend. The one exception, some lower tier companies that are maybe you know, on the bubble a little bit, I'll say, from a risk standpoint, the regulatory environment on banks is, you know, we've all seen in the paper, has really tightened up, and the regulators really encourage banks to lend to better companies, stronger companies. They're still discouraging banks from lending to weaker companies. And I think there's some companies that are very good companies. The regulators are really hammering banks if they're not making, you know, just the best loans. And I think that could hold back the economy a little bit.
Are you talking about the regulations that have been in place for several years that Congress passed, that you and your colleagues are trying to...
Dodd-Frank?
Dodd-Frank,
yes.
Named after
the
Senator Dodd,
yes.
and former Congressman Barney Frank from
yes.
up in Massachusetts. Are you talking about that?
That
you're saying that has tightened things up in terms of credit loans because the loans have to be of a certain...
That's part of it. Well, that's part of it, and also, you know, the federal regulators, whether it's the OCC or the Fed that regulates banks, you know, they weren't as diligent as they should have been going into the recession. And, you know, they want to make sure that they don't make some of the mistakes of the past. And it's like anything else. The pendulum's probably gone a little bit too far. It needs to come back a little bit because banks have to be willing to lend to, you know, not just the best customers. You know, there are some really good companies out there that maybe have a little hard time getting financing.
Holding on to the money on the sidelines doesn't help consumers. And as you said, you've got to move that money too.
Correct. It doesn't help the economy either.
Brad Fouss, Executive Vice President, Wholesale Banking at Sun National Bank. Brad, thank you for breaking it down for us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good stuff. Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Activists in cooperation with the American Medicine Chest Challenge, Choose New Jersey, NJIT, Health Republic Insurance of New Jersey, the New Jersey Education Association, Berkeley College, and by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been produced in partnership with St. Joseph's Healthcare System.